Hey friends, I have a very dynamic in-the-moment update with Bix Weir from Road to Roota ready for you. And boy, we're watching collapse happen in real time. Bix, as you know, we've been documenting the collapse. I've been doing it with Bill Holter, Rob Kirby, Andy Hoffman, yourself. So many others know what's going on, including Peter Schiff, Jim Rogers. The collapse is happening. How are you, Bix?
I'm good. It's amazing that it's taken so long, but it really is kicking into high gear now.
Yeah, it's happening in earnest. And Bix, as you know, there's pension fund managers all over this country that would kill for a 10, 11, or 12% return over the course of an entire year. And just this year alone, we've seen gold up 12% and silver is up 11%. And I don't think we've seen the end of it based on derivatives melting down, $55 trillion in derivatives exposure at Deutsche Bank. And according to Bill Holter, I just spoke with him yesterday, called him up just to get his opinion on it. He says Deutsche Bank's real derivatives position is closer to $75 trillion. Bix, there's so much going on. Where would you like to start?
All of the above. Truthfully, the gold and silver stuff, it's still on the computer program. It's still being rigged by the derivatives. Once the derivative meltdown happens, it affects so much of everything. And there's so many counterparties that are wobbling now. Deutsche Bank is an amazing story because, it's around 75. I'm hearing 85 trillion. But if they're the largest derivative holder in the world, and I think their stock's down, I don't know how much. It's cratering today again. There's definitely deep, serious problems at that bank, and they hold a lot of the European debt derivatives, and they're the counterparty. If that counterparty goes away, you're talking about a meltdown of the entire derivative system, including gold, including silver, including the U.S., the swaps and the U.S. treasuries, and all that stuff will melt away because they're such a large player. They are the biggest player, at least that of the banking system that we know of. So the whole meltdown of AIG, where the U.S. came in and bailed them out for $300 billion or something, that's nothing compared to what's going to happen at Deutsche Bank.
Well, Bix, you just mentioned Deutsche Bank's stock price. It just crashed to an all-time low, a record low on Tuesday. And what we're seeing happen here as the cascading collapse of derivatives begins to have that ripple effect around the globe, we're seeing people panic as they rush to precious metals, gold and silver in physical form, as everyone's starting to realize with $7 trillion in bonds, which now have negative yields, according to Zero Hedge, there is no safe harbor. The banks are the last place you want to put your cash. So more and more people are putting their money to work in physical precious metals. And in a minute, Bix, I want to play for you a very important soundbite as it pertains to paper precious metals. But first, Bix, I want to get your opinion on some extremely big news that we saw on January 28th when the silver fix broke. For the first time in recorded history, the LBMA tried to set the silver fix price below the market price, and the market didn't respond. One of the biggest pieces of news we've seen in maybe ever.
Well, it's obviously a rigged job to start with on the LBMA. You've got, I think, it used to be 6, and then Mitsui left, and now it's 5 people setting the price of silver. The whole concept of why they have to do that should have everybody scratching their head. Why can't you have a free exchange where people come in with cash and buy physical silver? They have to have a fix instead of a real exchange. It's an association. The entire concept of them, if you look at the annual average daily volume, and you annualize that average daily volume, it's over 100 billion ounces supposedly transferred every year. That's ridiculous. And anybody who believes that whole setup of the London fix, and now it's called the London price, is legit, is ridiculous. I mean, the whole thing is a con, and now it's breaking down, and that's what we get to watch.
Yeah, and I want to remind people that it was N.M. Rothschild that began the gold fix in London back in September of 1919. And it was, I believe, in April of 2014, Bix, that they introduced this new quote-unquote electronic silver fix. But really, the mechanism for fixing the price, and when I say fixing the price, that's their words. They literally, Bix, fix the price. The mechanism for doing so really didn't change. The price is set every day by 6 participants: HSBC, one of the most criminal banks on planet Earth; JP Morgan Chase Bank, of course, that's Rockefeller, another criminal bank; Mitsui & Co., which you note has now bowed out, the Bank of Nova Scotia, Toronto Dominion Bank, and UBS, they use that system now run by CME and Thomson Reuters. Reuters, again, a connection to the Rothschilds. But the criminal fix on the 28th of January, Bix, was set at $13.58 per ounce in silver, and yet silver remained above $14.20 all day long, and since it showed nothing but strength. Bix, I think this is a sea change.
Well, I think the rigging of that number on that day, which was I think it's the day before the last day of settlement, that has to do with derivative contracts in silver, and I believe it was very large derivative contracts. And you notice they haven't gone back and changed that. So there was a winner and there was a loser on a gigantic silver derivative contract that is settled based on the London silver price on that day that they rigged the numbers. Now, the fact that they have not gone back and adjusted the numbers or even claimed that it was not legit, that is very telling. As somebody wanted a winner and somebody wanted a loser, and that's exactly what happened that day. This is part of it all. There will be a shutdown of the silver exchanges, both the COMEX and the LBMA. That I've been talking about that for years. These corrupt exchanges that are self-regulating are ridiculous. There's an Asian silver exchange that's supposed to start up in April, which I'm excited about. Not that it's going to be any more upfront than the ones that are currently going, but it'll give people a different option. And I think a lot of the silver players, the big silver players, are kind of ready for the transition from an electronic derivative type market, which is the silver market right now, which trades over 300 billion ounces a year, to a physical market. No futures, options, and contracts, no silver derivatives, no swaptions, none of the garbage that we see today that is used to rig the price will be available after the system crashes and after the derivative market crashes. They're going to start up a new exchange where you have cash and you pay for your silver, physical silver, in cash only. I believe everything else will be outlawed once people lose all their life savings. They're going to be real pissed off at these derivative players. So we're entering into a really exciting time for silver.
Well, one of the things that needs to be hit on here, Bix, and you know as well as I do, that the propaganda that's constantly rolled out as it pertains to derivatives is that, quote-unquote, derivatives is a zero-sum game. At the end of every derivatives contract is a winner and a loser, and at the end of the day, it's a wash. That's completely not true. As Bill Holter has said to us, when the losers can't pay the winners are losers too. And I think the panic we're seeing globally here as it pertains to the Deutsche Bank situation, with $55 to $85 trillion in derivatives exposure, there's going to be a lot of winners that aren't going to get paid, Bix, and that will be the cascading ripple effect that ultimately leads to total collapse.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, you kind of go back to when Blythe Masters was setting up the credit default swap market, back before the 2008 crash. And, her whole concept and the JP Morgan concept was that you are basically, the banks are taking risk off their books by writing, credit default swaps. That way, you're not stuck with the loss. Well, every credit default swap adds a little more risk to the situation. And that's what Blythe didn't tell the world about, is that it wasn't minimizing the risk for the banking system. It was increasing it exponentially based on every single derivative contract that was written increases the risk overall of any kind of underlying asset. So the bigger this derivative bubble blows, the more risk there is. And you're right. One big default by a counterparty like Deutsche Bank, for example, the largest derivative holder in the world, it would destroy the entire system, because all of a sudden all the wash contracts on these derivatives would not be a wash anymore. You're still on the hook. You made a bad bet on a credit that's not going to pay you, but you're still on the hook for the other side of that deal.
Well, I want your opinion on this. I just listened to an incredible interview the other day with Willem Middelkoop. Of course, he's the author of The Big Reset. And I want to play this soundbite for you, Bix, because I think it's absolutely incredible. Listen to this as it pertains to hedge funds, pension funds, fund managers, and paper precious metals.
Central bankers are quite afraid that too many people will start fleeing towards gold. So that's why pension funds are not allowed to buy physical gold. I'm a fund manager myself. Within the permits we have, we're not allowed to invest in physical gold, only in financial products connected to gold. So,
which is laughable. I mean, if you think about it, it's laughable.
It's laughable. So, by reevaluating gold to a level of $4,000 or $8,000, you make gold that expensive that the general public can't buy gold anymore. So then gold becomes too expensive for the general public. So you can't flee towards gold anymore. So gold will be used only as an anchor for this new financial system and will be only owned by central banks.
Bix, couple of big takeaways there. First of all, of course, Willem Middelkoop is talking about the big reset, and gold ultimately will be priced far higher in dollars. There's just no other alternative. It's happening. It's going to happen. It can't be stopped. But the other important thing there, Bix, is that fund managers are disallowed from buying physical precious metals. They have to buy paper products, paper gold, paper silver, and it just speaks to what we've been talking about for so long, Bix. If you don't have physical, if you don't hold it, you don't own it.
That's true, and that's been, before the ETFs and all that, they weren't even allowed to own anything except maybe mining companies of gold. Then with the ETFs, they're allowed to get. The game is being played on every level. And it's not anything new. It has been going on for a long, long time. And I know that a lot of people saying, oh, everybody's getting into physical. Truthfully, I don't know anybody besides people in our group, which is a very small group, who buys physical gold and silver. I can still walk around with a silver or gold coin anywhere in a big city like San Francisco, and nobody will have ever seen one before, and they'll be in awe of it and say, cool. They won't give you any money for it. They're paper money. But nobody has the awareness these days, especially in the financial system. I know a lot of stockbrokers. I know a lot of people who deal in pension funds and things like that, and they have no clue what is going on behind the scenes. And that moment that the world kind of stands up and says, oh my God, I should have had physical, everybody and their mother is going to try to get their hands on it, and that's when there's not going to be any available. Those who have it will not sell it at any price because they see the system breaking down, and people will be trying to get out of gold and silver mining stocks to get into the physical, and they're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, and guys, we've been talking about this for a very long time, but now we see the chickens coming home to roost, right? We know Willem Middelkoop says we can't buy physical gold. We're disallowed. The central banks don't want pension fund managers, hedge fund managers buying this stuff. They want you in the paper products because the paper can be manipulated. But that game is coming to an end. And again, I'll cite the January 28th silver fix breaking. For the first time I know of Bix in recorded history, it's a big deal. The world is waking up to this paper charade. And one guy who got it right, Bix, a long time ago and has been ahead of the curve on this thing from day one is Kyle Bass. And here's a soundbite I want to play for you guys from Kyle Bass recounting his reason for taking delivery of $1 billion in physical gold.
Kyle, can you talk a little bit about gold and why at UTIMCO, why at UTIMCO you actually took delivery of the actual gold?
So I'll give you my opinion. I won't speak on behalf of UTIMCO.
Sure.
So my opinion is very simple. As a fiduciary, which I am in that position, to the extent that you own gold and you are going to own it for a long time, it's not a trade, it costs us about 90 basis points a year to roll it through financial futures contracts. And then we went and looked at the COMEX. So the COMEX at the time had about $80 billion of open interest between futures and futures options. And in the warehouse, they had 2.7 billion of deliverables. So 80 billion of open interest, 2.7 billion of deliverables. We're going to own it a long time. You're on the board. You're a fiduciary. What do you do? Like, that's an easy one. You go get it. All right. So you go take $1 billion of the 2.7 billion and let them worry about the rest. Mm-hmm. And when I talked to the head of deliveries for COMEX and IMEX, I said, well, what if like 4% of the people want delivery? And he says, oh, Kyle, that never happens. We rarely ever get a 1% delivery. So, and I said, well, what if it does happen? And he says, well, price will solve everything. I said, thanks, give me the gold.
So, Bix, I think if memory serves, Kyle Bass was on the board at the University of Texas, and I think they took delivery of the gold for the University of Texas, not for his hedge fund. But Bix, he's talking about the COMEX there, and the COMEX situation, since this conversation took place, the COMEX situation has only gotten worse, far worse.
And it's it's the unspoken, ridiculous, obvious thing about the whole system is that the comics cannot deliver on their promises, and they never will be able to. And as long as the system keeps going, what they'll do is they'll change the rules. We see that all the time. Take Kyle Bass's what he did with gold and translate that over to silver. Why gold? Why gold? Why not silver, which is a much tinier market and much less physical available for the world? That's why the U.S. Mint can't produce quantities of the silver eagle to meet demand. Why not pull that off with silver? I mean, if Kyle Bass really wants to make money and really wants to be a good fiduciary for his fund, go in and grab all the silver you can right now and then see what happens to the price.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just looking this up, and it was the University of Texas Investment Management Company taking delivery of its gold. And I'll tell you what, the other thing that he was right about is he was urging Texas to create its own bullion depository. Why trust these criminal banks to quote unquote hold the gold? Trust us, Bix, we'll hold the gold. This is a playbook that the Rothschilds invented hundreds of years ago. Sure, give us your gold. It's heavy. You don't want it in your pocket. Take our paper receipt. You can trust us. We'll hold the gold. They realized less than 10% of the people would ever come back to get the physical, so they just sold 10 times more paper out there than they had physical. Things have only gotten worse since. Why would anybody at this point, Bix, trust these criminal banks to quote-unquote hold the gold?
Well, let's go ask Germany, who tried to get their gold back from the Fed in the U.S. and it's taken years or however long. No, you can't trust, and you can't trust anybody at all anymore. Truthfully, with the collapse of the system it's basically impending. This is the collapse of everything, of all kinds of electronic monetary system. The U.S. had for a long, long time the reserve currency of the world, and we have abused it such that it is collapsing now. Why would you be in any kind of third party reliability situation with your metal? Do not keep it in Comex vaults. Do not keep it in any vault. Keep it in your own possession only. I've been screaming this for so long because at the end of the day, even the most trustworthy people will not be able to deliver your gold or your silver. And you don't want it concentrated so the government can come in and confiscate it either. You want it in your own possession, hidden in your own way, so that only you have access to it. And that's the key for going forward.
One thing that occurs to me too, Bix, I wanted to ask you about is the situation in Venezuela. Do you remember when Hugo Chavez famously took delivery of their physical gold? They repatriated gold from the New York Fed, and that wasn't that long ago, a few years back, and now Venezuela is being targeted by the bankers. They're suffering terrible hyperinflation. I think the IMF is saying expect 720% inflation this year, and now Venezuela is in the situation of selling its gold, its physical gold, to pay off its debts. It's a real shame, Bix. It just goes to show that these bankers typically get the last laugh. But I think ultimately we're going to get the last laugh, Bix, as these criminal banks do finally melt down.
I'm not so sure that Venezuela is going to sell their gold rather than put it in some kind of gold derivative, keep possession of it, and put it out in some Goldman Sachs derivative. I seem to recall them doing that a few years back. They might do the same thing. Anybody would be crazy to sell if they're looking out for their people, to sell gold and because some bank or some central bank is demanding it. That's just, I mean, you're selling your country short, and they're going to come after you when all this falls apart.
Yeah, but look what they did to Gaddafi. Look what these criminal powers that be did to Gaddafi over his gold. I mean, he had plenty of gold. He wanted to, I think, have a gold-backed dinar. He was off the reservation, and what'd they do? They went in and they killed him.
And that has been the story for a long, long time.
And they stole his gold, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly why we went in there. Other than there was a few other things, but it was mainly the gold. And you can go through all kinds of invasions and wars we go through, and a lot of it has to do with gold and the selling oil in U.S. dollars. Anybody tries not to do that in the past, they would have been taken out like Saddam Hussein. But now, Iran's talking about it. Everybody's talking about it because the U.S. doesn't have that power anymore, and the world knows about what we have done over the last 50 years. And that's the problem is the light is being shown upon the Ponzi scheme and the games that the U.S. has been playing. And there are no more secrets anymore. And all these countries know about what the U.S. has done. And they're making their moves to get in a position so that when the U.S. goes away, it won't affect them as badly as it would otherwise.
You mentioned Goldman Sachs as it relates to Venezuela and the gold. I want to talk about Goldman Sachs for a second, get your take on this. Let's take 1 minute to expose the false right-left paradigm, and let's expose two, I think, absolute criminals and liars that are running for president right now. Number one is Hillary Clinton. Number two, Ted Cruz. Hillary Clinton got $675,000 for 3 speeches, Bix, that she did for Goldman Sachs. That's a pretty good wage. Of course, we don't know what she said in those speeches. We're not privy to those speeches. They were private. And on the other hand, we have Republican, quote-unquote, Republican Ted Cruz, who failed to disclose, I think, $1 million in credit he got from Goldman Sachs. And in his paper filings, he noted that his wife was a baker, not a banker, not a Goldman Sachs banker. So we have 2 people who appear to be bought and paid for by Goldman Sachs running for the White House. Is there anything more disgusting than that, Bix?
Well, it's nothing new, and everybody who I think it's really interesting. Obviously, the bad guys, as I call them, have decided that they want to have Hillary Clinton in there, and truthfully, I couldn't imagine a worse candidate to single out for running for the office of president when she has such a long laundry list of crimes that at any moment, whoever's going up against her can raise in a debate. And that, I think, is a key component of what might happen. Then again, if we have a financial collapse and the world is turned on its ear because of the financial misfeasance of everybody in the world, will we even have an election the way we usually have them? I mean, these candidates won't have any money to run for office. The government's not going to have any money either because they keep all the government money in banks as well. So it's kind of a situation. What will the world look like on the electoral scale if there's no money to run campaigns and Hillary Clinton can't pay the people that she pays to support her cause? That I think is really interesting because if what I think is going to happen is the good guys take over and kick all these crazy politicians and bankers out, we might actually have a chance to elect somebody who is out for the people and is a real candidate and not bought and paid for by the Republicans or the Democrats.
Yeah, well, I hope so, but I'll tell you what, I think as far as a poster child for the establishment, for the criminality and bloodthirsty mental illness of the establishment, there is no better poster child than Hillary Clinton. I agree with you. It's absolutely astounding to me. I say this in interview after interview because it's astounding to me that the mainstream Mockingbird media could be complicit to the degree that they are to really, quote unquote, allow this woman to be even mentioned as a front runner or a serious candidate for the presidency of the United States. It speaks to the criminality of the Mockingbird media because you're right. You said Hillary's crimes. There's a litany of them. There's a laundry list of crimes going all the way back probably to the death of Vince Foster, which I think the Clintons probably played a role in. But the woman has Benghazi blood on her hands. She's got the secret email server doing private business. She's got Henry Kissinger whispering CFR talking points to her in her ear. She is literally a criminal, and she's a poster child for how broken this nation is that she can even be mentioned as a front runner.
I agree, but you can go back to the Bush family and their history and Bill Clinton, and I mean it goes back so far. I would say since Kennedy was taken out, the election system and who gets put up for election for the president has been completely controlled by the bad guys. Maybe an exception of Reagan, but they tried to take Reagan out in the first couple months anyway. So, yes, our system is broken, and we have lost control of our country. We've lost that control for a long time. So, Hillary is probably the worst of the worst today, but would you compare the crimes against what Bush Sr. and Grandpa Bush did and all that? So, I don't know. The only way to get rid of these people, I think, is to crash the whole system.
All right, last question for you. You and I did a interview a while back, I think the title of which was something like The Horrifying Truth History Channel Will Not Tell You. and people can listen to that for all of the details of this last subject. But Bix, as it pertains to the collapse, as it pertains to the stock market and stock certificates, as it pertains to people's portfolios, those who still have money in the stock market in the form of stock certificates. Let's talk just a little bit about seed and company. Let's talk a little bit about how to protect yourself if you're going to try to retain those certificates. Because again, Bix, they're just paper and they're not in your name. If you have a brokerage account, if you're getting that statement every month, those stocks, guys, are not in your name. Bix, can you explain?
Well, I think it goes much deeper than that. And in that, not only are the stocks that you think you own not in your name, they are owned by 10 to 20 other people, the exact same share of that stock. If you look at the high frequency trading, none of those stocks are ever settled, meaning cash paid for the share of the stock, put it in your name, contract signed. None of them are ever settled, and you can tell by the volumes of stock trades that are not settled. And what the SEC calls a not settled stock is a failure to deliver. There's over 300 million of them every day. So the concept of electronic money and electronic assets really only came about in the mid 1970s with the invention of computers. And now all you get is this piece of paper, your brokerage certificate or your brokerage statement that comes every month, and it tells you how rich you are or how poor you are. You don't own those at all. And I think everybody needs to wake up to that. I think they are, though. If you look at the amount of views that our interview got about this, the DTCC and Seed and Company, this mysterious entity behind the DTCC that every single stock and every single bond and every single mortgage-backed security is in the name of Seed and Company. And who is Seed and Company? Supposedly there was an investigation in the 1970s in Congress, and it is in the name of one or two people. They believe it was the Rothschilds or somebody who controls the Rothschilds even. Rub your head around that one. So yeah, get out of that system as fast as you can, because when the crash happens, everybody will be saying, okay, well, I own this amount of this company because I own this share. The reality is you don't own that share. Seed and Company owns it, and 10 other people are claiming the same share that you're claiming.
Yeah, well, I'll back you up on one thing here as it pertains to phantom shares. Overstock's CEO, Patrick Byrne, famously took that fight against his company, Public, and bemoaned the Wall Street naked shorting of Overstock.com. And he may have saved his company, Bix, because as he was really able to prove, there were phantom shares of his company being sold short with no physical stock certificates to back up those shorts. And his company was being attacked. And he took that fight, he took that public, and I think was able to save his company from being shorted to zero.
Oh, yeah. And he wrote, or he has this great series called Deep Capture. Anybody look up Deep Capture on the internet and Patrick Byrne, and you'll find out exactly what's going on. And it really is a gigantic game of musical chairs where there's so many more shares that they buy and sell than are actually available, and they can naked short till the cows come home. A lot of the rules were changed after the .com bust and after what Patrick Byrne brought to the fore, but there's still 300 million shares not delivered every day. And I mean, that is pure corruption at its finest. And if you're in the stock market or in the bond market or you have a checking account, savings account, all this stuff is not owned by you and is electronic blips on a statement that will go away once the system melts down.
Yeah, and another nod to Patrick Byrne. You'll recall this, Bix. Just a few months back, he announced that Overstock holds 3 months of food and $10 million in physical gold for payroll in preparation for, quote, the next collapse. Boy, was he ahead of the game on that, because here the collapse is unfolding and his gold position is up well north of 10% since he bought that.
Yeah, I love the guy. And, why not add silver to that is my take. But the really cool thing, and I think it's we don't want to get into this right now, but he's also a big Bitcoin supporter and takes Bitcoin on his Overstock.com site, and he allows people to buy almost anything you want with Bitcoin, and I love that about him, and he really gets what's about to happen.
Yeah, he's a forward thinker. Well, Bix, we really appreciate your time. You have a new book out, don't you? Tell us a little bit about your new book.
I do, and it's I love this one because In the first two books, I was dealing with how we got here and the banker conspiracies and all that, and what's going on in the current situation. This one's called The Root Awakens, and it's about the awakening of people to the things we're talking about today, and kind of where the system's going, what's going to happen to gold and silver and Bitcoin, what are the new technologies that are going to be released that have been hidden from us for so long, and who will our new leaders be after this crash. Is really exciting, and I'm selling a lot of them, which is really fun, and hopefully everybody can get a copy. Just go to my website, roota.com, and it's right there at the top.
All right, Bix. Well, thanks a lot. And guys, thank you so much for hanging with us in this interview. Another gripping interview with Bix Weir. You can check out his new book at roota.com. Bix Weir has been our guest. Bix, thanks for helping us document the collapse.
Thank you, Sean.
Guys, thank you so much for your support at sgtreport.com, where it's our goal to give you the very best real news, the antidote to corporate propaganda 24/7. And thanks for checking us out at thelibertymill.com as well. Have a terrific week.